Good morning, everybody. Live here from the birdhouse. And today we're talking about a subject everybody seems to know a little bit about. If you've ever found wild birds, squirrels, and squirrel proofing your feeders. As always, we love to know who's on. You can say hi in the comments. If you have any questions, you can throw those in there and you can let us know what kind of things you're seeing in your yard. We love to know what kind of sightings everybody is having, especially with the weather being so mild. It's only a matter of time before birds like the bluebirds start checking out their houses for the spring. I was having a couple robins in my backyard yesterday and this morning, hopping around getting some insects out of the ground. So it's feeling like spring out there, at least the last couple of days, but I think that's going to change shortly. But as always, you can say hi in the comments or throw any kind of questions you have in there as well. First of all, when we're talking about squirrels, what is a squirrel? It's distinguished from other rodents by their bushy tail. They have chisel-like teeth, which they can use to chew apart quite a few things that you might have found. They have strong legs, really good for climbing. They have sharp claws, and they have sensitive whiskers on their face and their front legs, which help them navigate. They are very territorial. They can live an average of 3 to 5 years in the wild, but can live as long as 8 to 10 years. And color variations are common. We talk about color variations here and there with birds. Some of them are melanistic, some of them are leucistic, and there's a little bit of everything in between. So color variations are common. The melanistic variations, which are those black squirrels that you might see around, they seem to have a higher cold tolerance as well. So you might see them further up north as well, a little bit more commonly. Some facts about squirrels. Squirrels can find food buried beneath a foot of snow. Squirrels' front teeth never stop growing, so that's why they have to constantly chew things. A newborn squirrel is only about an inch long, so they're very, very small when they're born. They get bulky to stay warm during the winter. And they don't dig up everything that they bury, so that does help result in some new growth of trees and things like that. This is our most common squirrel that you'll find in your backyard, the gray squirrel. They are called nature's regenerator of forests because they do bury a lot of different things. They hoard food in numerous small caches for later, and some are recovered right away after just a few hours, some until not months later. One squirrel alone can make several thousand caches each season. So especially in the spring, if you're gardening and you come across some kind of cache of a whole bunch of seeds or nuts, it's probably from a squirrel, probably from a gray squirrel. They have really good spatial memory to remember where they put everything, and they use their smell, their sense of smell to uncover caches as well. They are what's considered crepuscular, which means more active during dusk and dawn, and they don't hibernate, so you'll see them all winter long. Some of our squirrels, like chipmunks, for example, do hibernate, but the squirrels don't. So you might see their footprints in the snow pretty often, and they have this little pattern here where their hind legs are in front of their forelegs. So that is your gray squirrel, and this is what their nests look like up there on the top left. In the wintertime, they'll roost in hollow cavities or screech owl houses, but then come the spring and summer, when it's time for them to have their babies, they'll make nests called a dray in trees, and that's where they'll raise their young. So it's really common to see these leaf nests in trees. They might breed up to twice a year, and the first litters are born right around now. So they're born in February or March, and their second litter is June or July. So if you start to see some little squirrels around, that's going to be their first litter of the year. So it'll be soon. And each litter contains anywhere between 1 and 4 young, usually. Then there's also the red squirrel, which is smaller than the gray squirrel, but they are very, very territorial. They can be quite nasty, a lot nastier than the gray squirrels sometimes. They're primarily found around conifer trees. So you'll find them around pine trees. And that's what they like to eat. They like to eat the pine nuts. They're mostly active during the day, so they're diurnal, and they don't hibernate either, so they're active all winter long. We have a bunch of red squirrels here behind the store here at the birdhouse. So if you ever want to see a red squirrel, we have them here on the little trail behind the store. They feed primarily on seeds of conifers, so that's where you can find them, by conifer trees. And they'll begin caching seeds in a central location in the summer to last through the winter and into the following spring. They can have anywhere between 1 and 7 caches of these little food stores, and they have 1 litter a year, anywhere between 3 and 4 young. They're very, very vocal. They make a lot of sounds, and they do a lot of chattering, chirps, distress screams. So they are very, very loud. And sometimes it almost sounds like there's a bird back there, but it is these little red squirrels, and they are very, very loud. Then there's also the eastern chipmunk, which is in the squirrel family. They're a small squirrel with distinct stripes that go down their back. Here in New York, we just have the eastern chipmunk. If you're out west, there's a whole bunch of different chipmunk species that you might have that are similar to our eastern chipmunk. They live in wooded areas and parks, backyards. They prefer habitat with brush piles, logs, or some kind of surfaces for them to hide in. They have anywhere between 1 and 2 litters a year of 3 to 5 young. And they do undergo long periods of rest or torpor in the winter. So you usually don't see them in the winter months because they are going through these long periods of rest. And they do an elaborate burrow system also underground. They can climb trees, but you often do see them on the ground. They have these elaborate homes and tunnel systems, and they're mainly active during the day. So they are also diurnal, just like the red squirrels. And they will transport food in their cheek pouches, which you've probably seen before. They can shove their cheeks full of food, and then they'll use those, they'll store them usually somewhere else. We also have flying squirrels. And flying squirrels are nocturnal, so you might not see them as often as you do some of these other squirrels, but they are around. They don't truly fly like a bat does, but they glide from tree to tree. They have a furry parachute-like membrane called a patagium that stretches from their wrists to their ankles, so that helps them glide from tree to tree. And their tail provides stability in flight. So here's a picture of the flying squirrel doing just that. They are nocturnal. They'll spend the winter in tree cavities, and they also make a nest in trees in the spring and summer. So here's the northern flying squirrel and southern flying squirrel. So there's 2 species around here. Very, very cute. And then also there's woodchucks, or groundhogs, they're known as. They are also in the squirrel family. They belong to a family of large ground squirrels called marmots. They have large incisor teeth that grow about 1/16 of an inch per week, so they have to constantly chew as well. They're well adapted for digging, and they're mostly herbivorous, so they eat a lot of plants. They retreat to their burrow when threatened, and their burrow is where they'll sleep, they'll raise their young, they'll hibernate in there. And one study found that an average woodchuck burrow has had 384 pounds of dirt excavated to make it. So these are pretty large burrows as well. And they undergo true hibernation. So they will sleep all winter long. So when you see a woodchuck or a groundhog, that is a sure sign that spring is on its way. But if you've ever put out a bird feeder, you've probably seen something like this. This is a gray squirrel that is on a peanut feeder, and they are really good at clinging onto feeders and finding ways to get to your bird feeders. But there are different things that you can do to keep them off. Squirrels can be tricky because they can jump about 5 feet high up in the air, about 7 feet across, or if they're jumping down from something up high, say like a tree or your roof, onto something, they can jump about 9 feet down. So they can really be quite acrobatic, and they can really launch themselves. So there are things you can do, though, to keep them out of your feeders. For example, you can get a squirrel-proof feeder, and there are such things, and they do work. Some work better than others. Our best sellers are these here. This is a brand called Squirrel Buster, and this is one called the Squirrel Buster Plus. And basically all squirrel-proof feeders work kind of the same way. They're all weight sensitive. So if a squirrel gets on the feeder, something will shut down so they can't get to it. So in this feeder, for example, the birds can sit on that perch just fine. The birds are really light. They're mostly feathers. Their bones are hollow, but squirrels are significantly heavier than the birds are. So when the squirrel sits on this perch will close down and it will cut off the access to the seed so the squirrel can't get to it. So squirrel-proof feeders are a thing. These are other squirrel buster options here. They work really, really well. And basically anytime the squirrel gets on it, even if they get on the top of these, the whole cage will shut down. So these work really well in keeping the squirrels out too. Same kind of idea, weight sensitive. We also have some that will flip the squirrels right off. This is one you might have seen videos of called the flipper. A squirrel gets on the perch and it'll spin around until the squirrel flies off. There's other things called the tipper, for example. This has a tray that will fall off when the squirrel gets on it. This is one called the whipper, and it has perches that collapse. So when the squirrel grabs onto the perch, it falls down and the squirrel can't hang on. Same idea with this one. So there are different feeders that will keep them off. This is another one that's been around for years. This is like a hopper style feeder, so it holds a whole bunch of seed. And this perch here, if a squirrel gets on it, this metal plate that's on top, that's kind of above this cardinal's head here, will shut down and again cut them off from the seed. There's also feeders that have cages around them. Same kind of idea. The squirrels can't get into the feeder because the cage is too small for them to fit inside. So the smaller birds like chickadees or downy woodpeckers can go right inside. Larger birds will kind of cling onto the outside and stick their heads in to feed. But having a cage around the feeder will keep the squirrels out also. And then there is a squirrel-proof suet feeder by the Squirrel Buster company as well, which keeps squirrels out. Same idea as the other Squirrel Buster feeders. It's weight sensitive. So if a squirrel gets on it, this big cage that's around it shuts down so they can't get to the seed. Another thing you can do is if you have a pole system set up, you can put what's called a baffle on the pole. And these are really good because the squirrels will try to climb up the pole, which they can very easily do, but they can't get around these baffles. So the key with the baffles is, though, you have to put them up high enough so the squirrels can't just jump over them. So sometimes you do have to put them up, say 4 or 5 feet high. We hear sometimes people say, oh, the baffles don't work. They don't work. They do if they're set up correctly. So if they're set up high enough so the squirrels can't just jump over them or jump from something across onto the pole, they do work. And so if you've got a baffle on your pole so the squirrels can't climb up, you can put any kind of feeders on that pole. It doesn't have to be something that's squirrel proof. So this is probably the ideal solution for squirrel proofing if you're able to do it. If you're not able to set up a pole system like this, having a squirrel proof feeder is a really convenient thing to do. There are also squirrel slinkies, same kind of idea as a baffle. The squirrel can't climb around it. So they try to climb up the pole, they grab that slinky and it just bounces up and down so they just can't grab onto the pole to climb up it. So this is kind of an inexpensive way to keep them off. Sometimes we hear of them, tearing the slinky off, which does happen here and there. So you might have to, readjust it here and there. But this is also good if you've got a pole somewhere that the baffle doesn't work. If the squirrel can jump over the baffle, or if you've got a pole that's, say, on your deck or something like that, that the baffle just won't work at keeping squirrels out, having a squirrel slinky can help with that. So something else that you can do to keep them off. There's also hot sauce. So squirrels and mammals, they can taste hot things, but birds don't have as many taste buds, and so they can't taste things like really, really hot peppers. So there is hot sauce that you can put on seed that will coat it. We also have seed that's already coated with the hot sauce. This is really the ideal way to go. You can get the hot sauce to put on seed you might have, but it is really, really hot. So you want to be very careful when you are doing that. So personally, I like the seed that's already treated with the hot sauce. Squirrels can taste the hot. They don't like it, but the birds don't. So not only do we have this loose seed like that you can pour into a feeder, we have the seed logs, we have suet that's been treated with the hot sauce. So that's another really good way you can keep squirrels out. Here's some suet that has the hot sauce on it. So again, if you can't squirrel proof your feeders, really, you can squirrel proof the seed that you put in them. There's also a seed called safflower, and squirrels don't really like it for some reason, and neither do the blackbirds like grackles and starlings don't really like it. So this is one way to get birds like cardinals and finches. They like the safflower, but squirrels really don't. So another thing you can put in feeders, if you can't really squirrel proof them, you can put the seed in there and they just don't like it. And yes, you can put out suet as well, the hot pepper suet to keep the squirrels out. And then not feeders at all, but houses, sometimes squirrels will get in. They are known to raid houses here and there. If there's eggs inside, sometimes they'll pull those eggs out, or they might do something to the nestlings. You can help avoid that by putting one of these tunnels on the outside of the house. It's meant to keep predators out, not only squirrels, but raccoons as well. And it's just a little tunnel that you screw on the outside of the house, and it makes it so the squirrel can't reach inside the house to grab the eggs or anything like that. So if you've got squirrels that are raiding your bird houses come nesting season, we have these that you can put on the outside. They're called bird guardians. So that is what I have for you guys today as far as keeping squirrels out. If you have any questions, you can throw them in the comments, or if you have any sightings, absolutely throw those in there. Let's see, Randy is on. He says, good morning, Liz and everybody. Rhonda is on, watching from Canandaigua. Hello, Rhonda. Let's see, Mike says, hello, Liz. I have the squeaky little brown birds and was told they are brown-headed nuthatches, but I looked up and all the data shows they aren't in northern Michigan. There's probably about 6 to 8. So squeaky little brown birds, there's a lot of squeaky little brown birds around. They could be house sparrows, would be my best guess, especially if you've got a group of 6 to 8 of them. If you can take a picture of them and send them in, we can take a look and see what those might be. My best guess would be house sparrows. If you're in northern Michigan, it could be different types of sparrows too. It could be white-throated sparrows, possibly. So yeah, if you can snap a picture, you could send it to us on Facebook or Instagram, or you can email it over to us and we can take a look and kind of let you know what it is you might have there. And this is our email address. You can always email us here at info@thebirdhouseny.com, and you can always visit our website also, thebirdhouseny.com. But if you've got pictures to submit, you can do it via our social media, or you can just send us an email here as well. Laura is also on and says, thank you. You are very welcome. So that's everything I have prepared for you guys today. We'll be back on Tuesday with another broadcast. And until then, have a great weekend, and we'll talk.